Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corman Productions, here to talk about This Is Us, starring Johnny Kincaid as Baby Jack, Season 6, Episode 12, Katoby. This episode was directed by Ken Owen, who has directed 30 episodes of this series. In addition to his 25 directing credits, he also has 37 as an actor. The episode was written by Dan Fogelman and Isaac Aptaker. Before going any further, I will tell you a couple of things. 1. This is not a spoiler-free video, so if you hadn't watched the episode yet, I highly recommend you go and check it out and then watch my video. Secondly, if you like this video and want to support the channel, please like, share, and comment, as well as subscribing to my channel. Okay. I really wanted to like this one. As many of you who have watched my videos know, I've had a disdain for the whole Toby and Kate divorce storyline coming into this year. And I have well covered that. I wanted nothing to do with this storyline. But Kate's episode of the Big Three trilogy, while not something that I enjoyed, played out reasonably well and in a way that made sense. Last week's episode was an absolutely stellar affair, with a scene-stealing performance from Johnny Kincaid as young Jack. He was at it again this week, though with far less screen time. That episode was a masterclass in acting, directing, and a continuous rising tension. It gave me hope that this week, which I knew would detail the end of Kate and Toby as a couple, would continue in the same vein, that their swan song would be handled well, and be emotional in the This Is Us tradition. I'm sorry to say that didn't end up being the case. I actively kind of hate this episode and the way it played out. My two biggest beefs. 1, this is an episode that is hurt by the usual non-linear storytelling approach that the creators have regularly employed throughout the series. We start 5 years in the future, the timeline we saw in the last season's finale, with Kate getting ready for her marriage to Philip. Kate gets a phone call from Toby, this is new, we did not see this last year, to both congratulate her and to ask her if she remembers what she said to him the day that they signed their divorce papers. And then we cut back to present day, which is where this episode should have started. Toby and Kate's divorce is a foregone conclusion. It's a dramatically inert approach that significantly hurts this episode. But this problem really doesn't start here. It starts with the aforementioned flash forward of the season 5 finale that revealed her impending nuptials to Philip. That was a mistake. I get what the creators were doing. They were trying to create excitement for the upcoming season, revealing a big twist at the end of a season finale. But this actually goes further than that. There was a fan speculation that what we saw was a misdirect, that Kate was not in fact marrying Philip in that scene, and that Toby and Kate were not actually going to get a divorce. My longtime friend Stacy, who is the reason that I've started doing these videos in the first place, was in that camp. She continued to hold that theory as the season has progressed. Undermining that speculation has been interviews from the creators and series stars Chris Sullivan and Chrissy Metz, who confirmed that the divorce was upcoming. In my opinion, if they wanted this story to have the maximum amount of punch, they would both not have had that flash forward scene and not straight up told us in interviews that they were in fact going to get divorced. It would make sense if they were actively lying to us to continue the misdirection, but after this episode it is quite clear that that isn't the case. We came into this season knowing that Toby and Kate's marriage was doomed. In my view, that is not good storytelling. In fact, it is very bad storytelling. If we were not aware from the get-go that Kate and Toby were heading for Splitsville, this episode could have had a great deal more impact. Imagine if we followed their efforts to save their marriage and ultimately those efforts were doomed. That's a potentially compelling and relatable story, something that a lot of us have been through, and could have been a fantastic emotional episode and or arc for the series, because you can't really tell that story in one episode, kind of like this episode tried to do. Even though we did lay quite a bit of the groundwork before this, we didn't lay enough. The end result was not that. What we saw of their efforts to try to patch up their marriage was pointless, because we already knew how it was going to end. Now, there were some people who loved this episode, feeling it gave them a lot of answers. For instance, Madison and Elijah did in fact get married. Kate and Sophie renewed their friendship to the point that Sophia is now attending her wedding with her husband, presumably meaning that she was not in fact going to end up with Kevin, because she was already married, unless we go in a direction that I would not be happy to see in the next couple of episodes. For instance, maybe she cheats on her husband. And no, I don't want to see that. Speaking of Kevin, what even was his arc this season? We see him with multiple women in this episode in multiple different timelines, which is fine, I suppose, but we spent so much time building him up with Madison last season, watching him grow into a man, the man that we knew he could be, or at least I did, that this season has been depressing for his character. But again, that's not as much a beef about this episode, and more about how last season ended, and not specifically how this episode went. We got answers for sure, and I want those answers. There's plenty of things that I want to know that I still don't. But I also want those answers in a dramatically satisfying way, and not just flung at me. This episode majorly dropped the ball in that regards. In fact, most of this season has, if I'm being honest. My friend Adam, married to Stacy, was like me, not a fan of this episode. In a message he wrote me, that episode was such a painful, disjointed mess. They were clearly going for some kind of memento-like storytelling, the story from both ends at once, but without any mystery as to the end. The whole thing is just a painful slog that nerfs its own impact by saying upfront, don't worry, Toby's happy about how all of this ends in the end. Memento, by the way, if you're not familiar with that movie, was a Christopher Nolan movie, actually one of his first, which basically tells the story of its protagonist, a memory challenge protagonist, going backwards. Brilliant film, by the way, and I highly recommend that you check it out. Anyway, what Adam says there is basically something that I completely agree with. This is a miserable approach to storytelling. Adam also told me that after this episode, he had nightmares about divorcing Stacy. No word on whether Stacy was remarrying a pretentious, unlikable British guy, however. Which brings me to my second biggest beef. Why is the character of Philip involved in this episode? Specifically, why are we delving into the relationship between Philip and Kate in this episode? An episode which is supposed to be about Kate and Toby's marriage coming to an end. Can you allow me to mourn the ending of this relationship, for a little bit at least, before asking me to invest in a new romance to a guy who suddenly has a major personality change? Seriously, this is not the same guy that we saw in his 2 appearances last season, or even this season. This should be a celebration and warning of Kate and Toby's relationship, not telling the story of how Philip and Kate happened. We had 6 seasons of Toby and Kate's relationship. It took 3 seasons before they got married. We get Philip and Kate for this one episode, and next week they are getting married. Seriously, creators, what the hell? There were a lot of reasonably good scenes sprinkled throughout the episode. I don't have any issue with what the individual scenes that we saw on screen. A lot of them played out very well. But this is the kind of story you tell over a couple of seasons, not 2 episodes, and not like this. Which brings me to another comment from Adam that I pretty much agree with. He said, this was like if they took the episode where Jack died and cut in scenes of Rebecca marrying Miguel just to show, don't worry, she'll be fine in the end. It's really hard to find emotional resonance and closure when the story is so all over the place. I know why they did it like this, because they only have 6 more episodes to go to tell the story that they want to. Well, you know what? That's the creators' own fault. They had 2 options at their disposal. 1, cut down the amount of story they were trying to tell this season so we could tie up the series in a dramatically satisfying way, or do another season. As it stands, this is an extremely rushed approach that, for me, fell completely flat on its face. And that's despite having a worthy final message. I'm also not a fan of the borderline character assassination of Toby that has been going on for seasons now, making him out to be a terrible father that has never really been the case. We seem to have forgotten that Toby was a stay-at-home dad for a while. And yes, I know he had some trouble accepting Jack's blindness, but I think that's a natural response, and not something that he should be demonized for. He eventually built a room so that Jack and Kate could play together their music, which is something that Jack ultimately utilized to start his music career. Some of the ways we've seen Toby act just does not feel like Toby that I spent the majority of the series watching. I get that cheap people change, but well, blah. I would be more than happy to have Kate and Toby both backgrounded for the remainder of the series. Seriously, after this, I have no interest in seeing any more of their story. But next week, we're going to see Kate marry Philip. Oh joy! And that's after spending, about 5 minutes on their relationship. It's quite possible that we're going to be spending the remainder of the series, mostly 5 years in the future. And I kind of have mixed feelings about that. All in all, I was not a fan of this episode. It left a sour, depressing taste in my mouth and makes me worried about the remainder episodes of this series. Anyway, that's all I got for you for this video. If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join my 2 Facebook pages, the Corman Productions Facebook page, as well as the This Is Us Discussion Corman Productions page. You can buy something from the Corman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment in this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Corman Productions, signing off.